For more than a decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mandel. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Manouk, with Ezra Ginsburg. I'm your host, Drew Mandel, here for the next couple of hours to talk in depth about the Winnipeg Jets, the trade deadline, less than 2 weeks away. There was a big splash last night that we'll touch on, especially in the context of how that applies to the Jets and their trade deadline plans. And of course, much more on the Jets, the power play struggles, the usage of Nikolai Ehlers, and of course, what's going on this start of the 4-game road trip through the Eastern Conference. I say good morning to my fine friends, Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg. Gentlemen, we're all back together for the first time, and I believe 3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. So it's nice to be all
Dave
together
popped
here
on for about 6 or 7 minutes on the 14th anniversary show. But yeah, it's been 3 weeks since we've all been together for a full show. So
exactly.
Dave's walk and talk back
together.
Look at us, guys.
Dave's walk and talk doesn't count, but it's nice to be back together on a Saturday morning with you, gentlemen. Nice to see both of you. How are you guys doing this morning?
Well, I'm doing well. I hope you guys are also doing well. Hope everybody watching's doing well. Thanks for joining us on your Saturday morning. It's going to be a beautiful day. What a trade last night. You mentioned that was a big splash, Drew. Like, that was a tidal wave. Yeah. And I don't know if the Jets at all were in on Ryan O'Reilly, if Chevy talked to Doug Armstrong at all. We just don't know that at this point. But you have Austin Matthews, John Tavares, and Ryan O'Reilly, 1, 2, 3 up the middle. Like, not only is that probably the best center depth in the entire NHL, that might be the best center depth. The example I was using with Dave is since Crosby, Malkin, Jordan Staal, when the Penguins were winning those cups, whatever that was, 10 or 12 years ago. Like, that's incredible. And I realize O'Reilly can be a winger as well for you. And, some people are talking about, the Leafs gave up too much. Like, this is a rental, guys. With all of the, the big salary that the Leafs have, I don't think Ryan O'Reilly is going to be a long-term Leaf. But wow, when you're talking about a player who can actually, look at Toronto has to beat Tampa Bay in the first round, right, Dave? Like, that's all you have to be focused. We know how many times the Leafs have lost in the first round. It's been 20 years since they've got out of the first round. So Ryan O'Reilly, I think, goes a long way to helping you beat the Lightning in the first round.
Well, look, and we don't want to time will tell, of course, Dave, if it's an overpay by the Leafs. That'll be determined based on their performance come playoff time. And, to say now that it's too much or too little or not enough, or they mortgaged too much, way too soon. From the Blues perspective, I think I like the move. The Blues get a fair, for 2 expiring contracts, they get a lot in return. That's going to help them, speed up their rebuild. If it is, it looks like it's a pretty full rebuild there, or at least a pretty full retool for the next year or so. But
the amount of first round draft picks they've just got, Drew, they're going to be able to do that no problem.
Right, they get exactly,
especially in a deep draft, right?
Yeah, they have 3 first-round picks, I believe, this year alone. So that's going to certainly help accelerate things. So from St. Louis's perspective, it's a no-brainer. Now, the question is, from, because this is a Jets show and we're going to focus on the Jets and how this trade impacts the Winnipeg Jets. Now, to Ezzy's point, he said, we're not sure if, Kevin Cheveldayoff had discussions with Doug Armstrong about Ryan O'Reilly. It's safe to assume that they probably did. These guys have a history of working together in making some trades. Obviously, we know Paul Stastny a few years back. So it's safe to assume that they probably had some preliminary discussions, because GMs always have preliminary discussions with one another. Doesn't mean that there was a lot of significant, back and forth, or that there was, a formal offer on the table or anything like that. But from the Jets' perspective, Ryan O'Reilly was a guy that a lot of people made some connections with, that a lot of people thought would have fit well here in Winnipeg with his pedigree. And you look at his numbers this year, and I see people throwing out his plus minus as if that's a significant factor. Well, he was,
he's on a bottom 10 team in the league. So
that's my point. Do you not think that Ryan O'Reilly is going, his individual performance, when you look at some of his micro stats, which are, sort of that next layer of stats beyond the eye test stats, reflect a player who played well on a bad team. So you put him on a good team, I would expect Ryan O'Reilly is going to be a perfectly fine acquisition for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Whether or
especially
not
behind Matthews and Tavares.
That's right. Now, whether or not that puts them over the top, that's for time will tell in another show to discuss. We don't really care that much on that perspective. But what does this do from the Jets' actions 2 weeks out of the trade deadline? Does this, in your perspective, Dave, does this accelerate them getting involved in the trade market? Does this give them a kick in the behind to get something done before that Friday? Or is this still status quo for the Jets? We know Kevin Cheveldayoff likes to hunt for those deadlines. He doesn't do things earlier than he generally has to. Do you think this changes that mindset at all?
He's a true Winnipegger. He's currently at Bargain Harold's on Main and Jefferson looking for some good deals. That's what he's doing. And so although Bargain Harold's isn't there anymore, I think it's a dollar store, but regardless, he's searching for those deals as a good Winnipegger would do. And look, I mean, there's the talk, although the Jets are not mentioned a lot when they're going, the talk is of big game hunting, the Timo Meier hunting. The Jets are mentioned in passing with Timo Meier, but right now the teams that seem to be highest on that trade level from what we are hearing from people are the New Jersey Devils, I think the Dallas Stars,
Carolina Hurricanes.
So the Jets are mentioned, but they're not mentioned. And again, maybe that's typical Chevy, where he's, not really wanting to put himself out there that significantly. We'll see. Are the Jets more likely
Vegas
to be
in there as well on the right side with Stone out?
Yeah, that's a good point, Ezzy. And that like I said to you last day or 2 nights ago on the show, right? I said like it does have that feeling of Vegas, the Mark Stone. Speaking of Mark Stone, when they got Mark Stone from Ottawa, and the Jets were dancing around that one for a long time, as was Vegas. But Nicole remembers Bargain Harold's, or she forgot about it, but now she remembers. But anywho, the point is that
if we're going to talk about Bargain Harold's Day, we got to mention Uncle Willie's Buffet.
Well, there's a lot of things we could go if we're going to go back in the day. But anyways, no, I mean, a couple of things, Drew. First of all, the Blues obviously have pulled out and said, okay, we're done. And that's the good move for them. And they doubled their draft picks in the next 2 years, right? They went from 5, I think Andy Strickland, who covers the Blues, said they went from having 5 draft picks over, I don't know if it was 23 and 24 to 10. I mean, that's a significant jump, especially on a draft of like 2023, which is going to be so deep. So that's a significant move for the Jets' rival in the future. But for right now, what it means is that the Blues are done, and that really it's down to 5 in the division in the Central right now, and the Wild obviously are having a significant number of problems. They picked up for retaining 25% of the cap hit for Ryan O'Reilly. They got a 4th rounder from the Leafs, and so look, I think it's a interesting move, but I don't know that it necessarily suggests that it's going to kick Kevin Cheveldayoff in the butt. I think he does his things the way he does his things, and I think he's going to be measured. And I honestly don't think it's like, I mean, maybe if it spurred 3 or 4 subsequent trades, then suddenly he's in a position where he's like, okay, well now I got to get something done. But I think that right now it's a big move for sure in Leafland. But I mean, if the Jets weren't all in on those players, then I think for the Jets' perspective, you just keep doing what you're doing, which is, trying to work a deal that works for your team, whether that's Timo Meier, whether that's James Van Riemsdyk, whether that's one of the Shens, like, you know what I mean? Or Barbashev. Like, there's a lot of guys who are out there who are still in play for a lot of teams. So
is Braden Shen available? You said the Shen's there.
Yeah, no, sorry. Luke
Dave's
Shen,
starting rumors here.
Yeah, Luke Shen.
I would take Braden Shen in a heartbeat. He's a fantastic hockey player. You go back to 2019. What I thought was really interesting too is that Ryan O'Reilly chose Toronto, and they apparently got the deal done really quickly, according to Darren Dreger, and apparently according to Dregs as well, Toronto might not be done. I'm with Drew. I think the defense is still not where it needs to be. Like, I think there's no doubt O'Reilly makes the Leafs better, guys. And I think that's what ultimately this comes down to, Drew. With the O'Reilly trade and the Tarasenko trade, these are both pure rentals. Yeah. Not to say that, it's impossible that these guys get signed, but I definitely don't think O'Reilly is going to be signed long-term in Toronto. The Leafs just can't afford him unless they move out like a contract like Nylander or somebody else. So I think, it maybe puts a little bit of pressure on Chevy to accelerate his trade plans, but I don't think it accelerates it that much. I would imagine Timo Meier is a target. I really wonder about a guy like Vladislav Gavrikov. Like, the Jets have been linked to him in the past. So I think, everybody's focused on Meier right now, but I think, with Chychrun and Gavrikov out there, I don't think the Jets are going to be in on Chychrun. I just don't, based on what we've heard, you know, a rental makes a lot more sense than a guy who has term, because you're going to have to give up a lot to get Chychrun. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but you know, the O'Reilly trade is very interesting from the Toronto perspective, because Dubas is in the last year of his contract, and everybody knows that, you know, he was going to make a move, but I don't necessarily know everybody thought he was going to make the move this early. But you got to think that, again, Meier is a target, but as Brent Bellamy mentioned in the chat, I mean, Paul Stastny was completely off the radar. So it seems like we've been talking about Timo Meier for a month now, but it's possible that, you know, Chevy has a completely different player that we haven't been talking about in his crosshairs.
Well, you know, you mentioned Timo Meier. Both of you have now mentioned Timo Meier, and I agree. The Jets haven't been one of the primary teams linked to him. It has been teams in the Eastern Conference by and large. You know, New Jersey, who the Jets, of course, are going to be playing tomorrow night. They're sort of one of the surprise teams this year, I would say. You know, Carolina, of course, because does Carolina have that superstar? They have one of the best regular season teams year in and year out. Do they have that superstar scorer that can take them over the top? Or adding Meier to a Svechnikov, does that put them over the top? Does that move them into the upper echelon, or they already are in the upper echelon? Does that move them to the head of the class of the Eastern Conference? The East is such a beast. I mean, and I know it's a cliche and everything, but you can't tell me, looking up and down the Eastern Conference, you know, between Carolina, New Jersey, New York, Boston, Toronto, and Tampa, and I'm going to restrict it to those 6 teams, that one is so far ahead of the other, despite Boston's record. I know what Boston's record is, and yes, in the regular season they are so far ahead of everyone else, but come playoff time, that's just going to be an absolute bloodbath there. Yeah. So again, we've talked about this, and we've talked about that. I don't know why the Jets, you know, and maybe they are, maybe Chevy's doing his thing very stealth-like, which is how he does his work. You know, maybe they are in on Timo Meier, because I think he makes just so much sense for the Jets and really any team in the Western Conference, because his addition to a team in the West where there's no one great team might actually establish a great team in the West. And, you know, you have an idea now, or as the market continues to shape out, you have an idea of what the cost is going to be. This cost for Toronto, I mean, you almost have to look at it in 2 different ways. And I think I saw it on Twitter, Rachel Dory, who's been around the hockey world. She used to be in Vancouver, and remember, she left Vancouver, was the AGM. She left Vancouver in not great circumstances, and I think she's filed a lawsuit against the team, if I'm not mistaken.
That's really weird to me, Drew, because Vancouver is such a fantastic organization that treats their employees so well.
She's working for the Hockey News now, I think.
Yeah, but so I saw a tweet that she said it's almost like there's almost multiple aspects to this trade from Toronto's perspective. It's the first and the third for O'Reilly and Achari, and then it's like the second and the fourth go for the retention of the salaries. So
yeah,
you know, if there's nobody involved in retaining salary, you know, which for the Jets there doesn't necessarily need to be.
Right, it's a first and a third is what you're saying.
I'm not saying for sure it's that, but maybe you have a little bit of more of an idea. And maybe because, you know, there's, you know, he's a restricted free agent, Timo Meier, maybe there's another piece involved, and there probably would be. But, you know, a guy under control, under contract control, depending on what you do with the qualifying offer, and it's, you know, a first and a third for Timo Meier. If that's what the asking price is, and I don't expect that's exactly what it is today.
Well, it wouldn't be that it wouldn't a first and a third would not be for Timo Meier, Drew.
No, it wouldn't be. It would be more than that. But if it starts at a first and a third, that's probably something that I'm considering and probably doing.
You're doing that all day. If
it's only a first and a third, Drew. Like that's an easy decision.
I'm not saying a first and a third and a prospect. That's something I'm still doing all day, every day.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I didn't hear the prospect part. Yeah, I think they absolutely need a prospect. Timo Meier is one of their best players. You have to get something in return. Like that isn't just a draft pick. Another guy I want to circle back to, guys, a guy that we've talked about quite a bit over the last few weeks, but not necessarily as a prime target of the Jets, is Brock Besser. Right? Like a Minnesota kid, played for University of North Dakota. Like the Wild apparently really want him. We're not sure, but like, you know, he's still having a pretty decent season. He's not scoring, you know, he's a 2-time 20-goal scorer in the NHL. Pardon me, 4-time 20-goal scorer. Had to check that with Hockey DB, but you wonder if, you know, to me, Besser would be a really good fit in the Jets' top 6. He's got 2 years left on his contract, though, so we should mention that. But, you know, you wonder how, you know, I wonder at least how serious Chevy and the Jets are about acquiring a guy like Boeser. Because, if you can't get Timo Meier, you wonder if Boeser is, plan B.
Well, I mean, look, Boeser, there's a lot of concern about his game and his salary that's on the books. But, you wonder if you get him out of Vancouver. I mean, almost you get anybody out of Vancouver, you wonder if you can rejuvenate them just by virtue of
But he's young, Drew. Like, what is he, 25, 26 years old? Like, this is a guy who has a lot of good hockey. So to me, his cap hit is completely manageable. I don't think he's overpaid by any stretch of the imagination.
He's 25 years old. I mean, look, he's a scorer in the NHL. If you can score in the NHL, you have a unique skill set because it's the hardest
thing to do. Power play, whether that's the first or second unit. Like, he's a guy that's good on the power play, right? So I'm just putting it out there. I like Timo Meier is right now. Everybody's got a heart around Timo Meier. All Jets fans want Timo Meier,
he's a superstar in this league.
Well, but the problem is the Devils and the Hurricanes and the Golden Knights. There's probably 7 or 8 teams after Timo Meier. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. We know that the Jets organization likes their Minnesota boys, right? So I'm just throwing it out there. Brock Boeser, I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets acquire him before March 3rd.
Look, and somebody mentioned, I think Dave, you mentioned it earlier. The Jets are linked to in a couple of published reports. I think Elliot Friedman mentioned it in 32 Thoughts. The written version of it about James Van Riemsdyk.
Yeah.
And again, we know what James Van Riemsdyk is as a player at this age. He's not fleet of foot, but he can score. I mean, that's all he does in the NHL. He's done it his entire career, is that he scores goals. And he's scored big goals in his career. This is a guy who's been through every imaginable scenario and every imaginable battle in his career, and he's not going to cost you a ton. Again, he's a pure rental. So, I mean, you're probably getting James Van Riemsdyk for a reasonable price, and he certainly slots in. If you're concerned from the Jets' perspective about goal scoring, and I think a lot of people are, they would say that you need to shore up that the forward group. I mean, there's certainly tons of concern about the back end, and in particular the play of Neil Pionk, of course, and how that's going to shake itself out. But you almost have to you can't look at them necessarily in the same package. You almost have to look at them in all different pieces. Goal scoring, forward depth, and defense, and you might have to go to different partners to acquire all of that. And James Van Riemsdyk, again, you know exactly what you're getting from him. There's no questions about it. He's a guy who's going to score from right around the net. That's where
I don't think he's going to cost you a first round pick either. You might be able to get him for a second round pick, third round.
Probably.
Sorry, Dave. And you're adding a guy who's played over 900 games or almost 900 games in the NHL. He's got about almost 100 games in playoffs. So I mean, you're adding a guy who's got a lot of experience and knows how to play in important games and stuff like that. So I mean, look, I agree. Everybody's got their heart set on Timo Meier. And one of the things I wanted to add about Meier, because I heard about it with respect to New Jersey, not with respect to the Jets, but it was that there was no extension talks being discussed. At least I don't think actually the Sharks had even allowed any extension talks to begin. So from what I had last read, I don't remember if that was Kevin Weeks or one of those other guys, but the point is you're not getting this deal done, obviously, without an extension in place, because the fact is that you can't, if you're the Jets, you can't afford to take on Timo Meier, qualify him next year for $10 million and run the risk of trading a lot of assets and not retaining the player. You need to retain this guy 4 years. And look, he immediately makes your top 6 formidable, right? I mean, that's the whole idea of
it's already formidable.
Well, I agree, but what it does is it takes the pressure off of Cole Perfetti, who's a very young player, 2020 first rounder. It allows him to play maybe a lesser role and allows a guy who's, what is Meier, 26? So you're allowing a guy who's 26 years old.
It also allows number 26 to take on a lesser role. That's who I'm looking at. I think Perfetti should be in the top 6. I think it's Wheeler that should not be in the top 6.
But I don't disagree. I mean, I think Wheeler works well with Lowry. And I think that, again, the whole idea we've talked about for years with this Jets club is the idea of having a consistent top 9, not just a top 6 that can get it done, but a top 9. So whether it's Perfetti or Wheeler, it's one of those two who would be, maybe it's a split decision. Maybe you mix it up. But the point I'm making is, a guy like Timo Meier, you don't worry about, hey, I was on with Jim and Cam yesterday on Jets at Noon.
No big deal.
No big deal. But they asked me about that idea of like prospects. And I said, like, look, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff and you're in the last 2 years or the last year and a half now of all of these guys, Scheifele, Wheeler, Hellebuck, You've got their contracts. You've got the commitments. You've got Kyle Connor in his
Dubois.
prime.
Throw Dubois in there.
Dubois, of course. Nikolai Ehlers, again, guys in their not expiring contracts with Ehlers, Connor, Morrissey, but guys who are in their prime. Josh Morrissey playing the best hockey of his career.
Mm-hmm.
You have an obligation. You have an obligation to your fan base, really. The fans have supported you. You have an obligation to everyone. And I understand, don't get me wrong, a GM has to wear many hats, right? He can't just wear one illegal curve hat. He has to wear more than one illegal curve hat.
Toque.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we have an illegal curve top hat? Because if we do, I could use one.
Well, no, and we get you a little monocle. Yeah, for sure.
I did used to dress up as Mr. Peanut for Halloween on more than one occasion.
Well, I thought it was just a regular.
While you were eating peanuts.
Well, naturally, you got to live the character as.
But the point I'm making is that look, Kevin Cheveldayoff has to not just folks tend to think about this year. He's got to think about the next 5 years. But to be honest with you, he's been GM so long. I don't know if he has to think about the next 5 years if he doesn't get something done in the next year or two, because that's his window, really. With this team, with this core, it's 2 years. So, I mean, again, do you want to lose all of these young prospects out of your organization because what it might do to you 3-4 years down the line? You don't. But remember, the point is that remember what we talked about with the Blues when they made all those tweaks and then they end up winning a Stanley Cup. What did we say? We said you have to be prepared to do that, to either go to a Stanley Cup final or win a Stanley Cup. You have to be able to make a move, because right now the Jets are a very good hockey team, right? We're not discounting them, but are they good enough to just cruise through? I don't think they are. They don't have that depth yet. So you have to make some moves to acquire that depth. That's the simple reality of the Jets situation.
Well, you talk about the prospects, Dave, and everything else. And the Jets, I mean, look, they have prospects still. It's not like they've been trading away first-round picks willy-nilly for the last decade or anything.
Right.
Chaz Lucius, Brad Lambert, Rutger McGroarty. I mean, these guys are guys who have been drafted by the team, who are, under contract. Well, not McGroarty, but the other guys are under contract with the team, that if it requires you to stay relevant, or more than relevant this year and maybe a couple years down the road, maybe you lose out on one of those guys, or maybe you lose out on a first round pick next year or a second round pick the year after, or whatever exactly it might be. I mean, I you can't always just, again, they don't have a second round pick this year, but you look at what Toronto paid for O'Reilly. I think the second round pick was in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. So it wasn't a second round pick this coming year, as a first and a third this year and a second next year. So you can use some of these. They just have, it's not like their prospect pool is diminished or depleted. They've done a good job building it back up after they traded those first round picks for a couple of years. So now it's time to maybe use them again. You talk about the financial aspect of all of this. Well, we know that a home playoff game is worth what? About $3 million?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's generally the going number. Every home playoff game is worth $3 million, because remember, players don't get paid in the playoffs. So that's basically just, revenue, money. So you keep adding those home playoff games, maybe a round or 2 or 3 rounds of home playoff games. Well, that certainly, pays for a contract extension for a Timo Meier. That keeps your team more than relevant moving forward. I mean, there's everything about this year screams all in. And we've talked about it. Our colleagues in the media have talked about it. A Western Conference that is wide open, that, the Jets, who are playing, I would say, okay hockey as of late.
Am I the only person, by the way, I believe it's wide open, but
Colorado,
I think especially the Central is wide open. Dallas is a good team, but I don't think Dallas is. I actually think the Jets are better than Dallas. Mm-hmm. I realize Dallas is a couple of points ahead of them, but Colorado, we know all of their injury problems, right? So when we talk about wide open, I think it's just funny. The Colorado Avalanche, last time I checked, are still defending Stanley Cup champions, and they still have McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, Makar. I could go on and on and on, right? But they're not as good as they were last year on paper, right? Because you don't have Nazem Kadri, you don't have Andrei Burakovsky, but Georgiev has been fantastic in net. So I still think that they're a legitimate Stanley Cup contender. I just think it's funny when, it's like people have forgotten how good the Avalanche still are, even without Kadri and Burakovsky. That's all my point is.
To your point, you don't think the Avs are going to be out there big game hunting to get back to where they were last year?
Exactly. I think they are going to acquire. A lot of people were talking about Jonathan Taves a couple of weeks ago. I don't think that's going to happen because who was it that reported he's not going anywhere? I forgot.
It was Frank who's talking about. Frank Saravelia in Daily Faceoff was saying that a lot of teams are now concerned about this ongoing health issue. Is it another factor of sort of that long COVID he went through? Because he's been out of the lineup for so long out of Chicago that it's that he's sort of fallen off the radar when it comes to impending trades.
Right. And I think
hang on, Izzy, let me stop you right there. We got to go to break. Murat is coming up next for more Jets talk. Don't go anywhere, folks. We got a jam-packed show for you.
Fired up, Drew. There's lots to talk about here.
Exact. Fired up, ready to go. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning, and we're thrilled to welcome to the program from The Athletic, our very good friend Murat Atesh, who I think is asking if we can hear him, and we cannot hear you at the moment, Murat. I'm not sure if you can hear us.
Yeah, we need to hear you and less of Drew.
That's usually a lifelong rule here on the program. We have a look of perplexed on Murat's face. So
he can't hear us and he can't speak. That's what we like, Murat. We'll just keep talking. You just sit there. We'll be like, he brought some. Oh, he's gone.
He's gone. He's had enough. That's it.
Wow. That was the shortest appearance in the history of Illegal Curve.
Murat, can you really blame him for having enough of us?
He's fulfilled his contractual obligations. By
he did say he would be on the show. He never said how long he would be on the show for.
We only pay Murat for 10 seconds, and that was a good 10 seconds.
That was as articulate and as well-spoken as I've ever seen him, to be perfectly honest. So Murat is going to come back and join us, I presume, momentarily. In the meantime, of course, we can talk about some of his...
Maybe there was a trade. Did we miss a trade here? Maybe Murat had to write about it for The Athletic.
I haven't seen anything.
Well, that happened yesterday, Ezzy. That happened when I was doing the media with the Moose. The Leafs trade broke as I was doing media. But thankfully, Anthony, as part of the Moose communication staff, waited till after we were done talking to the Moose players and Nolan Baumgartner before he broke that news.
Can you hear us now, Murat?
Nope.
Can you hear us now?
He's looking perplexed.
It seems to be that we are...
Murat, can you use sign language to communicate your thoughts?
Yes, Murat, do you have a quill pen there that you can just write out your answers? Let's just write out our questions and he'll write out our answers and then we'll hold them up to the screen.
Couldn't we just send folks to read maybe we'll just read his latest piece on The Athletic.
There you go. We can just send that article instead. Ezzy, maybe text Murat or something to figure something out here. I'm not sure what that
doesn't accept my text. What are you talking about, Drew?
Okay, so
he has a restraining order against me.
As per Murat Atesh, Winnipeg beat Seattle on Tuesday, asserting the Jets' position toward the top of the Western Conference before losing 3-1 to the Blue Jackets on Thursday in Columbus. No, I won't. That's just a little tease. You have to go pay for the article.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about. So obviously the game against Columbus on Thursday was not pretty.
Drew, let me
rephrase. They not pretty in terms of the result.
Yeah, they dominated the game. The second period was average at best. The penalties both ways, not just against the Jets, but for against Columbus too, I thought were fairly marginal. The Pierre-Luc Dubois one, which ultimately led to the Patrick Laine goal, was atrocious. I mean, I don't know how you call that a penalty. That's embarrassing. And but look, they dominated the first and third periods. The Blue Jackets had the better chances in the second. So I mean, it's one of those games.
Can you hear us now?
Come on.
Oh, there we
can hear you.
I heard you.
Can you hear us?
No, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Now. Yeah.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you. Just speak. Yeah, we can write out our questions.
You can hear me just fine, which is great.
But you can't hear us.
Well, why don't we write out our questions to him? We'll read our questions. Wait, Drew. Maybe we should put the questions in a bar across the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me create a banner here. Murat. Good morning.
Drew's going to spend 10 minutes doing this. Well, yeah. I mean, this is.
How does the Leafs trade impact the Jets?
Are you actually doing this right now, Drew?
The trade deadline. Well, Dave, when you
make do. Yes. All right.
Can you see that, Murat? Let's start there.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Y'all can hear me, yeah? Everybody's having a good time? Oh my goodness. I'm in the audio settings. I'm playing. I think I'm hip. I think I grew up on computers. I think I know how to choose an input and an output, and here we are. but I'll get right
Murat,
in. How does the Leafs trade impact the Jets plan at the trade deadline? I mean, first of all, congratulations to the Toronto Maple Leafs on going all in an effort to win a playoff round. And second of all, I think that Winnipeg is maybe, I think their fantasy would be to be able to add a top six, middle six type forward, ideally a right shot, maybe face-offs. You know, Ryan O'Reilly would check a lot of those boxes. I think so. I think that there's a chance. But I think there's enough fish in that sort of regard that I'm not sure that Ryan O'Reilly to the Toronto Maple Leafs changes Winnipeg's perspective wholeheartedly. If they're desperate for a face-off person, the Jonathan Toews possibility exists, although the latest from Chicago seems to be that maybe he'll be staying put. But I also think that, you know, in the trade deadline piece that I wrote evaluating Winnipeg's forward options, you sort of have to get a little bit lower on the list and a little deeper before you start to get into fits that seem to be more in the line of what Winnipeg would be shopping for. I'm not sure that, I mean, Timo Meier would be an absolute fun one for the Jets. And, you know, I'm sure Jets fans are still holding out hope, but it could be more depth options in that regard. How badly do the Jets need a right shot defenseman who can play top 4 minutes? Is this the Neil Pionk question? Is that
yes.
Everybody's nodding? I mean, they need the best version of Neil Pionk or a solution for that situation. You know, when Neil Pionk came to Winnipeg, there was some questions about what level of defenseman he could be. Was he just the third pairing defenseman that he had excelled in New York, and then top 4 was a bit of a struggle? He came and he showed up and he delivered 2 really quality seasons for the Winnipeg Jets. And he was aggressive at the Winnipeg Jets blue line. He was defending entries particularly well. He was Winnipeg's best zone entry denier in the year that I tracked that stat, his first season with the team. And lately, maybe since his injury situation last year, he hasn't been at that level. And I think that if you're looking to snap your fingers and say, hey, what would it take to completely solidify the Winnipeg Jets defense? It would be somebody to play that role. And I get asked about Erik Karlsson as a result all of the time and how fun that would be. Just imagine having 2 Norris candidates on the same team, one anchoring each pair, and you could play those guys behind anybody. I'm not sure that's the aisle that the Winnipeg Jets are shopping in, as much as it makes sense. You know, I think that they're going to stick with the core of guys that they've got and maybe look more into that depth aisle where, you know, a Luke Schenn could play in front of or behind Dylan Samberg, depending on how that's going, or a Joel Edmondson who's local, has some playoff results. And I know that that's disappointing for fans looking for that all-in move, especially on, you know, the morning maybe after the Toronto Maple Leafs went and got a star-capable center like Ryan O'Reilly. I'm just not sold that the Jets are in that all-in sort of, hey, forget what the cost is, let's do all of this sort of mode.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, Murat Atesh, who can see us but can't hear us. So it's a unique perspective that we're going with this morning on the show. We're typing our messages to Murat, and then he's responding. If you're wondering what's happening, it's going to make it a little bit weird for the podcast listeners, but we'll do our best.
Well, we're gonna read out our questions to Murat, so at least then the people who are listening on the podcast can get a sense as to what we're asking him, because we don't want them not to understand. They may not get the fact that what we're doing, this 21st century communication that we're doing as we're passing notes, as one of the folks in the chat so aptly put it. So Murat, my question to you, what you're reading right now, I'm going to ask it so people hear it. Is anyone off the table for you from a prospect's perspective when it comes to trades?
I mean, so prospects, right? Anybody off the table who could be reasonably moved and all of this sort of stuff. You know, it's interesting. I feel like the Scouts built Winnipeg as a competitive team. And in the years that Winnipeg fell off of, you know, contention sort of status from 2018-19 to now, one of the things that you saw was they didn't have a lot of draft picks. And they had an underwhelming number of draft picks. They starting from 2017, that trade they made with Vegas. 2018, they trade away a first. 2019, they trade away a first. All of that sort of stuff happens. And you're only just now able to look at the Jets prospect pool and say, hey, they're kind of cooking again, at that top end. They've been deep in various ways for a while, but that top end is only just now replenished with Brad Lambert's and Rutger McGroarty's and Chaz Lucius's. And it just seems like trading from that group of players from one perspective would be a challenge. Why move on from the future that your scouts have found for you after all of that time away? At the same time, if the Jets do look at their 2024 situation with pending unrestricted free agents, they're concerned about Pierre-Luc Dubois' future, all of those sorts of things, and they realize that, hey, the West is wide open right now. We're having a good season. Josh Morrissey is spectacular. So many players are, close to the best versions of themselves right now. Well, then at the same time, I'm not sure even one of those prospects is that 1A, can't miss. This is a surefire top center, number 1D of the future. And as much as, I think they'd be loath from their perspective to give up, say, a Rutger McGroarty, who they probably imagine as a future captain and sort of an Adam Lowry type player, but maybe with some offense and that leadership for sure. I don't know if it's one of those, if the player coming back was going to have that impact. And if they went deep, I don't know that there's somebody who's absolutely untouchable to me either.
Murat, let me ask you this question. I'm putting it on the screen. We talked about maybe the Jets shouldn't be all in this year, but given the current state of the Western Conference, given the Jets' current contract situation, you talked about it with the guys who are becoming unrestricted free agents in a couple of years, the uncertainty about Pierre-Luc Dubois, the wide open nature of the conference. Why shouldn't the Jets be all in this season?
I mean, why shouldn't they, right? That's the perspective. If ever there were a year, why not this one? And the only counter argument that I have available is if you believe that the West is too difficult to get out of even now, if you're looking at Dallas or Seattle, or you fear the rise of Colorado or Vegas or something like this, and you think, hey, the odds of this being the year, and I think that in a competitive industry, the read that people would make is no, we have as good of a chance as any of these players. So or any of those teams. The other side would be if you're concerned about what happens to your next window after this, because I was just talking about the idea that scouts built this team, and here's a group of prospects, maybe not, surefire superstars, but there's a lot of quality there in that top end. You have some young talent in terms of, prime-aged players, Kyle Connor, Josh Morrissey, Nikolai Ehlers under contract for a little while, Cole Perfetti coming up. Presumably Dylan Samberg is the front runner, but Ville Heinola, Logan Stanley, Declan Chisholm also possible. I don't think that these are earth-shatteringly elite quality futures in Winnipeg's perspective. But if you want to keep that window open for multiple playoff runs for a lot of years, it's just difficult to look at. I just said that they're not untouchable for the right price, but it's difficult to look at what would happen if you're trading 1, 2, 3 of these prospects from that McGroarty, Lucius, Lambert group, perhaps a first-round pick as well. Let's say you land Timo Meier, have a terrific deep playoff run. You don't win the Stanley Cup, and now you're sort of almost starting from ground zero with your prospect pool. If you're trying to optimize for make the playoffs many times over the next several years, you might want to hold on to your futures. If you're trying to optimize for, hey, just nudge those odds a little bit more in the favor of a cup right now, then all in could be the place to be.
Murat, I'm next here, and Drew's got the comment up there, so I'm going to say it out loud so people can hear it, especially listening on the podcast. Putting Ehlers on power play 1, and you wrote about this on The Athletic. Ehlers needs more ice time. That's obvious. But what else do you personally need to see? And what do the Jets need to do to make this power play better? Because there's way too many weapons out there for the Jets to be going 1 for 7 against the Columbus Blue Jackets. And obviously the second part of the question is the most important. Who is your favorite member of IC?
and then the Drew video cuts out. That's funny.
We wanted to eliminate Drew. We wanted to get rid of Drew.
Yeah. Remember the show Eliminate? This is like, there we go.
Oh, there he is. I don't know what you're doing to this guy over here. I don't know what it's like to be a Drew these days. I'll tell you. I'll answer that question first. Actually, why is my favorite member of Illegal Curve not Drew Menzel? It's because I see you walking your dog sometimes and you never wave back. I know what parks you frequent. I know what neighborhoods you frequent. I see you and the little dog walking around.
This is huge breaking news.
I'm like honestly a kilometer away, going like this, and you don't wave back, Drew.
You can't hear me. I can't defend myself. This is outrageous. I've never once. I would absolutely. Not only would I wave back, but there would be a stop and chat. Is what would happen.
I don't know, Drew. It sounds like you're snubbing Murat.
I'm not snubbing. I have no idea. I'm completely in my own zone, my own world. I have no idea that this has been happening.
This is a beef that I wasn't aware of.
I
always wave to Murat when I see him.
I can't quite hear you right now thanks to my technological ineptitude, but I assume you're digging and you're digging and you're digging, and I assume you've been unsuccessful. But so going to Nick Ehlers in the power play, I didn't know, he says. Nick Ehlers in the power play, I think that Winnipeg is ready for a personnel move, and that's been discussed. And you're saying, well, what else is kind of going on in that unit right now? One of the keys, and there's a certain analytics heavy group of fans that will think this is ridiculous, but one of the keys is the fact that Winnipeg is among the worst face-off teams in the NHL on the power play. And whether you attribute that to Scheifele being below 50%, Dubois being 50% on the nose, or Winnipeg's wingers and other players not necessarily getting those winger wins, whatever it is, Winnipeg is amongst the worst teams in the NHL when it comes to winning those power play faceoffs. Now, there aren't a ton of power play faceoffs, so the impact of needing to go back and, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, go recover the puck, get back into the zone, that shaves off meaningful time. If you look at the metrics and wonder, hey, why would a team this good not have a lot of shots per minute? Why would they not have a lot of expected goals per minute? Part of that is because they're starting, a lot of their power plays, more than the other teams anyways, needing to go back and get the puck. Second part fits right into Nikolai Ehlers. If you watch them go back and get the puck of late, they're having mixed success with their zone entries, even at 5-on-4 with space. And, that's easy to get upset about when a team is scoring 1 of 7 and then missing on 3 5-on-3s. You look at every little thing and you say, well, okay, this must be wrong. But the Jets could stand to improve their zone entries. Nikolai Ehlers on that second unit is an enormous part of why, let's say just recently in the loss, they took as many shot attempts as the first unit did in less than half the ice time. And that's not because they're shoot happy and throwing all of this junk to the net. A large part of that is just because they were able to get into the zone and keep it there. So for me, those are two keys that the Jets should have a little bit of control over, that you would think that they're discreet. You can identify those sorts of things. And then the parts that Winnipeg probably has more control over is some of its shot selection. I'm getting a little bit, I've seen a play repeat itself a few times where Pierre-Luc Dubois is off to the side of the net and he doesn't look to the net. He goes straight across immediately on that power play. He's playing that bumper position. He's just beside the net. He's got his left-handed shot and he hasn't driven that puck to the net. That's one example. I'm not picking on Dubois unique. Everybody suffers from a little bit of this, but I think instead of looking for that backdoor pass all the time, if he drives that puck to the net a couple of times, some of those seams are going to open up. And when those seams aren't open right now for the Winnipeg Jets, so it kind of looks like they're standing around a little bit and just throwing the puck around, waiting for something to open up. I don't think they're forcing those seams to open as much.
Murat Atesh of The Athletic is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on this Saturday morning. Murat can't hear us, so we're typing our messages to him and then reading them aloud so that he understands what the questions are. Nothing will get in the way of a good Illegal Curve broadcast. Let me tell you that, folks. That's for sure.
You know what the funniest thing would be if Murat could hear us the whole time and he was just pretending that he couldn't hear us?
Okay, well, let's not confuse them because we got to get these questions in. We don't want to add to that.
He has no idea why we're laughing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to get my question in. Murat, ESPN recently put out an article, Top 10 NHL Defensemen of 2023. Execs, players, vote for the best. Josh Morrissey was given an honorable mention. He ended up with like 16 points. So given what he's done this season, What gives?
I mean, what gives, ESPN? What gives everybody outside of the Winnipeg market, other than those who are frantically scrambling to like broadcast a game? What are the Jets stories? Man, I don't know. I have theories. Okay. Here are my theories. Theory number one, Winnipeg, small market. They only really pay attention to us when something's on fire. That's theory number one. It's cynical. It's a little overplayed, but there's something there, right? Mm-hmm. Theory number two, Josh Morrissey's excellence this season has predominantly been offensive. His defensive numbers are all right. His offensive numbers are phenomenal. That mirrors somebody who's having an even better offensive season, and that's Erik Karlsson. So if you're looking for the player that is putting up a phenomenal number of points or what have you, and some of Morrissey's metrics may come down depending on who he's playing with. He didn't have tremendous chemistry with Neil Pionk early in the season, but his defensive metrics really aren't as elite as his offense is right now. So there's sort of a shinier version of the same analytical player in some ways, with Erik Karlsson putting up even more points. So that may be part of it as well. I find that sometimes with these guys, people have to be on the radar of voters for multiple years, or media members for multiple years, before they start acknowledging them. Like, what would be a wonderful example of this? But you hear whether it's Erik Karlsson himself, Patrice Bergeron, Ryan O'Reilly, these guys often put up elite numbers for 2 or 3 years, and then they make the voting. They make the voting lists or what have you as well. So Morrissey may be new to that party as well. But yeah, what gives? I don't know. Let's go, in Morrissey's own words. Ben Wallace in the NBA. Yeah.
Ben Wallace was always so underrated that then when he finally got his notoriety, he became overrated. Sorry, again, you can't hear me, so this is very frustrating.
I like the Ben Wallace reference, Drew. That's good.
It's funny.
Poor Murat.
Oh, sorry, Dave. This is funny. I can't hear you, and that should be the struggle. But every time I open my mouth to talk, that's when I feel like this is an awkward format for me and my technological issues. So please excuse me. I just interrupted. What do you got? What was the question? I'm sorry.
And now we're paused because Drew's little sausage fingers are typing. Let's go, Drew.
Nothing. I go. Whatever. Hang on. Hang on. Somebody talk while I'm trying to type a question. Hold on.
Like, you were supposed to be writing out your question while Murat was talking, Drew.
Yes, and I interrupted.
And now Murat's thrown off. He doesn't understand why we're talking. Our main man, the lawman, is watching us from Vegas, and he screen grabbed this and said wrong captions only right now because he's having a little fun with our technology difficulties, as they say. So Murat's wondering what the hell I'm saying. The folks in the chat are wondering what I'm saying. I'm wondering what I'm saying. I mean, there's a lot going on, and Drew's sausage fingers continue to type. Hopefully a question at this point, Drew, because this is a hockey show. We want some questions. So get out your question already, Mindell.
I have a question for Murat, but somebody's going to have to type it out. So I don't know if it helps for
you could have typed it out, right, in the private chat?
Well, I can't post it, though.
David Riddick, discuss.
With real-life examples.
I'm sure everybody has listened to the audio, watched the clips of the David Riddick interview from the other day. Was it Wednesday after practice, where David Riddick is sort of, he's hesitant. He's pretending he doesn't want to get into the center of the media scrum. Maybe it's sincere, but he's playing a little bit coy. Some of his teammates are gathering around the scrum, just knowing he's a personality and knowing that something might happen. So Dylan DeMello walks by and he's like, "Hey, I'm just sticking around. Like, good luck to you, fellas." And David Riddick says to the group, "Hey, go ahead, please. Smart questions. It would be the first time in this circle." And so he's razzing the media right off the hop, which I got a kick out of. Nick Ehlers, like, it was almost a That 70s Show burn response from Ehlers as he walked by. And then Riddick, he had his laugh and all of that stuff. And then he talked very sincerely about how it's been a process for him emotionally, mentally, preparation-wise, transitioning from a time where he felt he was a starter, especially in Calgary when he took over that crease for a good while, to being a backup in Nashville, being a backup again here in Winnipeg. And he described that as a process, something he didn't always have on lock. And, maybe the mental side of the game can be contributing to why he looks like a completely serviceable, solid, reliable backup right now. I think he's deserved better this week than even the one win that he already has. He's played really, really well, in my opinion. Even the one that went through some traffic into screen, and it was against the grain. So, I mean, I think that Winnipeg's past the point of wondering if he can be good enough for that job. And now it's just kind of the David Riddick show. Whenever he opens his mouth, he seems to be confident, and it's just a good time to hear him speak.
I finally was able to type out a question. Here it is, Murat. For the Jets to be considered a true playoff threat, can it have Adam Lowry as its third line center, given his offensive struggles?
I mean, great question. And I think of this Ryan O'Reilly trade that the Toronto Maple Leafs just made. And they, I read Myrtle's piece on this, and he has Matthews, Tavares, and Ryan O'Reilly as centers 1, 2, and 3. And I mean, that's a murderer's row right there. Absolutely. And it's the sort of thing that, you imagine on paper. Toronto might just Toronto anyways, but on paper, that's as good of a center core as you can get. And you might imagine that, hey, with the Winnipeg Jets, if they were able to replicate something like that, if you could just snap your fingers, forget about the assets, Ryan O'Reilly's your third center, Adam Lowry's on 4, and, Kevin Stenlund, let's say, moves to the press box as a result of that, you'd think, oh my goodness, what a stacked team. And that Lowry-Barron duo, or Lowry-Appleton, depending on how you think of it, they're not so elite defensively that they can get away with not producing. They're very good defensively. They can play the tough minutes. They can give Winnipeg success in that role, but they're not impossible to get shots, scoring chances, or goals against. So they've got to produce. And right now, you're not really getting that from that group. Adam Lowry started the season hot offensively. That's faded a little bit. His power play numbers are low, but they're desperate for his face-off numbers at times. Kevin Stenlund gets power play time for the same reasons. And you would really like an upgrade there. I think the perfect player, if you could just write one from scratch, for the Winnipeg Jets fit-wise, would be somebody who can play second or third line minutes, is a right shooting forward, and can win faceoffs, whether that's their primary job or not. And then when the coach wants to pull Perfetti off when they're protecting leads, or Nikolai Ehlers off the ice when they're protecting leads, because they want a right shot who can muscle the puck out of the zone on that right wing boards, they can do that. And they can get the center coverage to add depth to that middle six as well. So that's are they good enough? Yes, because there's quality all over the lineup, and they've got Connor Hellebuck in a puncher's chance in any situation. Would you like that to be upgraded? By all means, absolutely. You look with Toronto center depth with some envy right now for sure.
Last question. This one comes from Ezzy. Cole Perfetti hasn't scored a goal since January 21st.
How come I don't get to read it, Drew?
Oh, I thought you wanted me to read it. You read it. Go ahead.
I'm going to read it. Cole Perfetti hasn't scored a goal since January 21st. What have you seen in his game that needs to improve to help him get back to scoring?
Yeah, it's funny. He hasn't scored a goal in a while, and he's been playing great hockey. So my read on Cole Perfetti is he needs to shoot. That would be a good start. I thought he played a really solid game. He's played solid since the All-Star break, has come out with energy. He's been creating dangerous chances for himself, for his line mates. And then you look at the game score at the end of the day, and he hasn't, a single shot like in his most recent game. And he's not necessarily, at least on paper, contributing to the offense in that particular way. But he's picking off passes. He's making strong defensive coverage. He's helping his team play in the offensive zone. And there have been plays where he's attacking the zone with that trademark. His brain is moving really quickly, even though he's not a burner, and he's creating opportunities like for Scheifele the other day. Scheifele gets the chance to cut into the zone. Nate Schmidt ends the shift with a shot that Korpisalo turns aside. That whole sequence starts with a Perfetti play and a Perfetti pass. What does he need to do to score? He needs to do all of that and create shot volume that he's absolutely not getting. And that's on him. But at the same time, I've actually sort of processed his game as a little bit elevated since the break. And I think maybe it's a matter of keeping at what he's already been about.
Murat Atesh is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Murat, thank you. This will certainly go down as one of our most memorable interviews, and I promise you that any dog walking related snubbing was unintentional, and the next time I see you on a walk, I'm taking you for a drink.
There we
is
go.
my commitment from me to you. I know you can't hear me, but we appreciate your time as always this morning. Yes, heart-shaped emojis, love.
I'm glad that you
and
guys
kisses.
worked that out because, I mean, I was going to say to Murat, if he could hear us, I was going to say he has no idea how many people Drew snubs. He snubs me all the time, and I've known him for 20 plus years. So great interview with Murat, even though he couldn't hear us.
Thank you, Murat. We'll let you get on with your Saturday. We'll see you again real soon. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Hour number 2 coming up next.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. What a day. Thanks for having me.
Oh, gosh.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rollies Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rollies, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollies.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. That was wild, boys. That was absolutely something we've never
The thing is, though, Drew, that was a great interview. Like, Murat couldn't hear us, but his answers were great. So really, that's all that matters.
That's true. It's exactly right. There was a lot of insight shared. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of give and take. You know,
we laughed, we cried, we cried again.
It was quite the dramatic interview. And it was big thanks to Murat for joining us and powering through despite the technical difficulties.
I give Philip Smithson the win though with his tweet at us talking about your snub of Murat, which will be living on in infamy.
We're going to be talking about that for generations.
And Philip said, Philip had it correct. He has you saying I didn't know, but obviously not true because with me he says he knew. Ezzy, Bad Drew, and Murat he didn't wave. So good job on Philip for correctly assessing the situation.
But just for the record, because now we can all hear each other.
Yes.
Because Murat couldn't really hear us though. Did you snub Murat or did you not notice him? Because it sounds like that wasn't just a one-time thing.
It's multiple,
Ezzy. That's been like a serial snubbing.
Look, I would never snub Murat. I would never snub anybody. Everyone that I've ever met,
That's a lie. You'd snub Ezzy.
No, I wouldn't. You know very well that I love Ezzy with all my dear
No, he
heart.
can't snub me because I would be hugging him and giving him a kiss on the cheek.
He would
So
be
he can't
chasing.
snub me.
He'd be chasing after me, and I'd be running
Yeah,
away.
That's
But,
true. Brixton would think it was Godzilla coming after him.
It's true. I would never snub Murat. I swear, I'm completely oblivious when I'm on. I'm oblivious in the best of times.
You
I
did
will-
snub,
I will
you did
attest-
snub Dave Shore in Kentucky, though.
Ooh,
No, that was different. No, that's different. It's not like I saw him and I turned my back. He's like, "Let's go partying." I'm like, "I'm with my wife and kids and my in-laws. I'm not really in a partying place."
Oh, well, that's not a
There's
snub.
difference there. That's not a
that's
snub.
not
I think
snub.
that was before Drew had kids, but I think there's a little
Nonetheless,
revisionist history happening there, Dave. Let's get back to Drew snubbing Murat, though.
I was not snub. I would never snub Murat. I'm just completely in my own world, and I would just wander aimlessly half the time when I'm walking my dog.
All right, enough with your defense. Let's move it along.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just want to be clear for the podcast listeners and for when Murat goes back and listens to this after he can actually hear us. I would never deliberately snub him, nor would I deliberately snub anyone. Speaking of snubs, though.
Yes.
Nikolai Ehlers getting snubbed a little bit with that playing time. See that segue? See what I did
That
there?
was good.
That's pretty good.
That was good. That's why you're the host.
Segue,
Go on.
nice little segue.
Thank you.
You interrupted yourself, but keep going.
I had to interrupt myself to compliment myself. No one
Yeah.
else is going to compliment me, so I got to do it for
That's
myself.
true.
In any event, obviously it sort of came to a head on Thursday's game in Columbus, where you mentioned the Jets were dominant 5-on-5, but the power play was really what cost the Jets the game. I mean, you can't have that many opportunities, 5-on-4 opportunities, never mind 5-on-3 opportunities, and not capitalize and not capitalize like they did. I mean, going back for a month now. So you go back, I know it's cherry picking a little bit of time and everything, but going back to January 18th, the Winnipeg Jets power play is 26th in the NHL. Now they have some good company with some good teams down there, like the Lightning and the Bruins and the Stars and the Golden Knights. So a bad power play doesn't necessarily mean disaster, but think about where this Jets team would be over the last month if the power play was just a little bit better.
You'd have at least 2 more points, right?
Well, certainly from Thursday night, no question about it. So let me ask you guys this. Is it, I think everybody agrees that Nikolai Ehlers needs to get more playing time and more power play one time. So how do you see maybe the change happening, between after Thursday's game and potentially before tomorrow in New Jersey? The team going to be practicing, and I think in about an hour's time or so.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock Central Time.
Yeah.
All the latest on illegalcurve.com. So how do you see this sort of change happening, given that what Rick Bowness said after the game, both Ehlers and Scheifele like to play the same spot on the power play?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that we do know, boys, is that Rick Bowness said there is going to be personnel changes on the power plays.
Yeah.
We just don't know what those personnel changes are. But look, we talked to Murat about this, 10 minutes ago or whatever. Like, it's obvious to everyone now. And I think it's almost absurd that we're talking about this, because I feel like we were talking about this back in the days of TSN 1290. Like, I'm talking 3 or 4 years back, that Ehlers should be getting, more power play one time. He needs to be getting more ice time on the power play. So if that means, power play unit 2 gets more ice time, or power play unit 2 starts, obviously, if some of the personnel that were on the first power play unit were on the ice when the penalty was called, that usually means power play unit 2 will start. But Ehlers has got to play more, and it's partly zone entries. But, Dave and I talked about this on the post-game show. He needs to be on the first power play unit or get more power play time, because he's one of the most skilled players on the Jets, period. And he's got a great shot. So I would like to see more of that shot. I would like to see him out there more. But I do think that the Jets need more of a net front presence. It's obvious, but they have to have more traffic in front of the goaltender. They need to get a little bit more greasy. They need to move the puck a little bit quicker and not maybe defer to, making the really nice pass. So I think the power play is going to be fine. And I think it's a good point that you made, Drew, about some of the other teams over the last month who have been struggling on their power play. Because when you talk about Boston and Tampa Bay, those are the 2 teams that I have as the top Stanley Cup contenders in the entire league.
Sure.
Obviously, those teams have a lot of guys that can put the puck in the net, right? We don't have to go over that. But the Jets, I guess what I'm saying in a roundabout way is, the Jets have way too much talent on both of those 2 power play units to be going 1 for 7 and, to be 25th in the NHL for the power play. They just have to get better. And you're right, Drew. They don't have to have a top 5 power play in the NHL to be successful and do well in the playoffs, but you definitely can't have a bottom 5 power play.
Well, what's especially perplexing to me, Dave, is, and Murat touched on it, the difficulties with the zone entries. Well, Nikolai Ehlers is a zone entry king. Yeah. And so, if a team plays him too aggressively at the blue line, Well, he's got the speed in which to just still break through there, to you know, to burn them. Yet if they're too passive, then they just gain it with you know, simplicity, because they're playing off of him. It just seems like if zone entry is sort of the starting point on any power play, clean zone entry, and it often is, even if you lose every face-off and they dump the puck down the ice, you know, and that takes 10 seconds. Well, if you're getting a clean zone entry, you know, after you retrieve the puck and he's the one bringing it in, well, then you're setting up your power play. I mean, you know, it's one thing to lose the face-off and then not have an option to get a clean zone entry. You know, that's sort of compounding the problem. So it seems like, you know, if face-offs are your issue, then you get a guy who's a zone entry machine, and you've at least solved half of your problem.
Yeah, I mean, the power play is perplexing. I think that's the best way to phrase it. And there's still, I think, the 16th overall power play in the NHL or something like that. So
middle of the pack, whatever it is, 16th, 15th.
Yeah. So even though they've fallen, you know, on hard times of late in the last month, they just, you know, they obviously had been firing enough early in the season that they had built themselves up a nice little reserve. Unlike last year, where, if you remember, the PK was so atrocious to start the season that they could never recover. And even though they were playing much better towards the middle and end, it had done so much damage they could never, you know, recover from it. But look, I mean, it's one of those things that we've talked about, and Ezzy and I spent a significant amount of time on Thursday's show discussing the power play, because that was the difference in the hockey game. And that's, you know, the fact of the matter is that the Jets are in a comfortable position. And so you're not sitting there hitting a panic button because they lost to Columbus and Columbus swept the season series. I mean, look, Columbus had just beaten the Leafs. Columbus had beaten, I don't remember who else they'd beaten. And Korpisalo played well. You've got to give him credit. But the reality is they didn't make it difficult for him. So what was the number one thing we talked about, Ezzy? The number one thing they talked about, because they had the shots. They had nobody in front. They had nobody taking away Korpisalo's eyes. So the entire time he would see those shots, there was no one screening the net. It was crazy. Like, it's one thing I understand. Every once in a while, look, Kyle Connor beat him without a screen on the power play that ended towards, it was 5-on-4 at that point. Yeah, with 1.6 seconds to go in the period. But the fact of the matter is that, and that happens. Look, Patrick Laine did the same on the Pierre-Luc Dubois power play or penalty, where he scored without a screen in front. Guys can score. I'm not saying it's impossible, but the reality is it makes it a lot more difficult when you have the numbers advantage. You don't need 5 guys on the perimeter. You need 4 guys on the perimeter, and you need 1 guy in front taking away the goaltender's eyes. And if you take away the goaltender's eyes, even if he makes a save, it potentially sets up for a greasy goal. And that's what the Jets need to do, because it's too much too pretty. And that's what they're doing right now. And you need to get back to simplicity. And what's simplicity? You fire a shot on net, you have a guy in front, he bangs home a rebound. There's literally nothing more simplistic in terms of hockey than that. And that's what they're not doing. They don't have that guy. And look, they have big guys. Pierre-Luc Dubois, big guy, could be put in front. You know, they've got Adam Lowry, if you want him on the power play.
Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler's played that role before. Scheifele's a big boy. Like, what you're saying, Dave, if I'm not mistaken, is that the structure and the foundation of the power play is good. It's you need to get a little bit more traffic, make it a little bit more difficult for the goaltender, and I think have a little bit more of a shoot first mentality. And it sounds like, even if it sounds simplistic, I mean, I think it's obvious. Like, it would be one thing if we were talking about, you know, the Jets don't have enough good shooters on the team. Well, that's obviously not the issue with Connor and Scheifele and Ehlers and Perfetti. Even Wheeler's, you know, shown us a good shot, even though he's more of a pass first type of player, right? So it's not like the Jets don't have an abundance of game breakers and power play scorers. They have that. They need to, I think, just make it a little bit more difficult and not play on the perimeter so much. And I think also, when the Jets were successful in the power play earlier in the season, they were scoring early in power plays. Like, they were moving the puck quickly, and they were getting the shot that they wanted, and they were scoring within the first, 20 to 30 seconds of the power play. And we're not seeing that now. And 1 for 7 definitely stands out. So we have the recency bias here, but it's going to be interesting to see, what changes Rick Bowness makes before Sunday night's game against the Devils. The Devils are a pretty good penalty killing team. I don't know if they're top 10, but they're pretty good. I know that as a Devils fan, but you got to think that the power play is going to have an impact in this game as well. And if it doesn't, it's going to have there's going to be power plays in the Rangers game or the Islanders game, or when they play Colorado at home, right? Like, this is if there's one area that I would say with this Jets team that I'm the most concerned about, it's the power play. I mean, I think, people are talking about, the lack of scoring in the bottom six. The Jets have such good scoring in their top six that you just need to augment that before the trade deadline and, bring in whoever it is, James Van Riemsdyk, Brock Besser, Timo Meier, whoever. And I think they're fine. But this power play, it's been struggling for a while now. Drew mentioned it's not just one game or two games. We're talking about, 10, 15 games here.
Well, you talk about the upcoming schedule, Ezzy. The next 8 games for the Winnipeg Jets, starting tomorrow night in New Jersey, are all against playoff teams. The New York Islanders are back in a playoff spot after they struggled so much this season. I know, and those bottom spots in the Eastern Conference are moving on a daily basis. So there's no guarantee that when the Jets actually face the Islanders, they're still going to be in a playoff spot.
And Washington doesn't have Ovechkin and Tom Wilson right now, so that hurts them.
Well, you look at it. I mean, Pittsburgh and the Islanders each have 63 points. Washington and Florida's on a bit of a heater as of late. They have 62 points. Even Detroit's still there with 60 points. So they're and they have some games in hand. So Detroit and Pittsburgh all have games in hand. Buffalo has games.
The Red Wings, I think, are only 3 points back.
They are. They're 3 points back, and they have 4 games in hand on the Islanders. So the Penguins and the Red Wings all have games in hand on the Islanders, Capitals, and Panthers. My point is, the schedule from now, right through the beginning of March is a difficult one for the Winnipeg Jets. And it was a couple weeks ago we touched on the fact that the Jets schedule, I think it was right around the All-Star break, we said the Jets schedule for the remainder of the season was one of the hardest schedules in the entire NHL. The Dallas Stars one, I think, was the easiest, if I recall correctly. But the Jets don't face a non-playoff team until Monday, March 6th against the San Jose Sharks. So you look at the upcoming schedule, you got obviously the 3-game trip through New York, or the metropolitan New York area right now. You come home to face the Avalanche. You come home, you got the Islanders again, a team that we just talked about, the Kings, and then you have that back-to-back against the Oilers, the home and away on the Friday, Saturday, the Friday being the trade deadline, of course.
It's going to be like a little mini playoff series.
Well, this is a very, this Jets, need to recapture every aspect of their game. And I'm not saying that they're, on the verge of some horrendous slide, because I don't see that happening. There's been no indication that that's going to be a factor. The 5-on-5 play, which of course the vast majority of games are still played at 5-on-5, has been pretty good as of late. It was good against Seattle. Obviously, against the Blackhawks, that doesn't count because it's Chicago. It was good against Columbus. But, when there are going to be times where your 5-on-5 isn't stellar, especially when you play against some of these more difficult teams, that you'll need to rely on your power play opportunities. And you'll need to take advantage of those opportunities, because this Jets schedule, you look at it even into March, there are, until, the latter half of March, until really Saturday, March 18th, where you got a back-to-back against Nashville and St. Louis. Both teams will be out of it by that point in time. We know St. Louis is already out of the white flag. I know they are, but Nashville might even trade some more guys by then. Right. St. Louis is already doing so. Then you got Arizona and Anaheim, San Jose. You got a couple harder games, one game against the Kings mixed in there. But from now until really for the next month, from now until the 16th of March, these games are all against some very difficult teams for the most part, and against the Eastern Conference, where the Jets have really not had a lot of success.
They're below 500. You're absolutely right. Like I'm with you. Like, nobody's talking about the Jets falling out of a playoff spot, but this next month here is really going to determine whether the Jets finish first in the division, second in the division, or third in the division, or if they're under 500, they might even slip into a wild card spot. Again, I'm not saying that they are going to, but they're going to have to play better. And you're right, Drew. Against Seattle, against Chicago, the power play, a game in which you have 7 power play opportunities and you only score once, that's when it really hurts you. Because most of the game, we talked about it, Columbus got a lot of power plays too. They got 5, right? So almost half of the game, or more than half of the game, was, played with a man short. So I think they got to figure this out. I do think, I told Dave, off air, my prediction is the Jets go 2-1 for the rest of this road trip. I think they beat the Devils. The Rangers, they've always had trouble, going back to your bachelor party in 2011, Drew. The Jets have always had trouble. And the Rangers, by the way, have won 6 games in a row.
7
games in a row.
They beat the Oilers yesterday.
Right. 7 games. You're right, Drew. Pardon me. You're right, Dave. I misspoke there.
Dave, I'm Drew.
And I think they beat the Islanders. So I think they'll go 2-1 over these next 3 games, but it's definitely not going to be easy, because all of these 3 teams, as you mentioned, Drew, are playoff teams, and they're trying to improve their playoff standing.
Well, let me ask you guys this: how much stock do you put into this? It's not even a narrative; it's fact about the Jets struggling against the Eastern Conference. Is that something that's just sort of
It's not a narrative; it's the truth.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not exactly. It's statistically, it's the statistics. So why are they struggling against the East? Is it something that's really like that they just don't match up well against those type of teams, or is it?
I think it's partly that, but I also think the East is really good.
Okay.
Right? Like that has a lot to do with, like, you could argue that 4 or 5 of the best teams in the NHL right now are in the East, right? We know who those teams are. I mentioned I put Boston and still Tampa at the top of that list, but I think you're putting Carolina in that list. I think you're putting the Rangers in that list. And who else am I forgetting here? Did I say the Leafs? I forget.
The Hurricanes.
The Hurricanes, I think I mentioned, but
Yeah,
the
the
Leafs, Hurricanes, Bruins, Lightning.
The top 6,
and
basically.
Rangers.
The top 6 in the Atlantic and the Metro.
Yeah.
And then with the wild card teams being probably similar to some of the better teams in the Western Conference. The East is certainly the better of the two conferences this year. So that, it could just be as simple as, you're right, the Jets are playing against better competition when they play the East, and that's why they're struggling.
Right. And obviously losing twice to the Blue Jackets, I mean, that's one of the worst teams in the league. So that's unacceptable. For some reason, the Jets have really struggled against CBJ. Maybe, Patty Laine scoring goals has something to do with that. The revenge factor. I'm obviously joking a little bit, but I mean, look, they should have scored at least a couple more goals last game. Korpisalo, like we talked about, the goal save above expected, it was something like 3.9, Dave, or 4 for Korpisalo. So that's absolutely ridiculous when you think about it. The Jets' expected goals were, I think they had 2.5 more expected goals than the Blue Jackets. So look, I think the power play is going to be fine. I think they'll turn it around, but it's really going to be interesting to see what exact personnel changes Rick Bowness made, because when you go 1 for 7 against the Blue Jackets, Dave, you know that changes are coming.
Well, so let's talk about that. We got a few minutes before we have to take our final break of the show. So what changes do you think happened there, Dave? We talked about, Bowness talked about it. He talked about Ehlers and Scheifele like playing the same.
Ask me in an hour, I'll sound like a genius.
Yeah, well, yeah, you and me both, of course. But I mean, so, how do they retool this? Because I mean, there's, how, who do they move to other positions, or who do they take off of the first power play unit to account for, to bring Ehlers in and or account for the fact that Ehlers and Scheifele like to play the same position? Can one of them move to maybe the middle, to the slot position, in the umbrella power play that most teams run right now in the NHL? Is there room for both of them? Maybe there isn't room for both of them on the first power play unit. That's not, I mean, it's hard to believe, but it's not impossible. So, who do you think is the first player who's likely to get shifted around when practice starts in about 40 minutes?
It's a hell of a good question, Drew, because honestly, like, I really don't know. I mean, like, you could say maybe you want a little more speed, so you take Blake Wheeler out, but Blake Wheeler's, of course, a very good facilitator, as you've talked about during the show. So, I mean, is he the guy who's coming off and are you replacing him with Nikolai Ehlers? Are you like, again, are you mixing it up entirely? Are you just going to mix up the composition and try and have a little more balance throughout the course, and maybe, I don't know, move a couple of guys off PP1 and then move them to the PP2 and do that kind of fix? Like I said, to me, the first power play unit, the problem is like replacing Kyle Connor with Nikolai Ehlers, or, Blake Wheeler with Nikolai Ehlers. Like, I mean, Ehlers obviously has a way better shot than Blake Wheeler. Not even a question there. So to me,
Wheeler, Dave, Connor, hold on 1 second though. Connor is the one guy.
No. You're not. What I'm suggesting is that he's just a very similar player to Kyle Connor. Of course, you're not replacing Kyle Connor off PP1, but what I'm saying is that Ehlers brings.
If they take Kyle Connor off of PP1 tonight, then
No, they're not.
Jump in the Assiniboine River.
Well, you wouldn't jump very far.
You would just hit the ice. You wouldn't.
Well,
really
actually, no. There is a part right along the shore when you're crossing the bridge that is actually open water, so you could actually jump into.
I don't know if you knew this, Drew, but Dave is a longshoreman.
My point is that you're not going to move. Those are very complementary players, very similar, and you're not going to do that. So
the obvious guy's Wheeler. Like, come on.
No, Wheeler would be the guy who to me would be moved off, and then what you do is you bring Ehlers in. But again, like I said, does Ehlers solve the lack of ability to go for someone on that first power play unit to be in front of the net? I mean, if you're going to bring Ehlers in, you have to tell Pierre-Luc Dubois he's got to park himself in front of that net and not move. And he's got to create that distraction, because if he doesn't, and if you're just bringing Ehlers in to be another perimeter shooter, then you're not really solving the problem. And if you keep Pierre-Luc Dubois high, between the dots, that's not going to do anything for you, because you're not taking away the goaltender's eyes. So if Pierre-Luc Dubois is prepared to park himself in front and then let those guys shoot, well, then you maybe have something. But if you're not going to have someone taking away the eyes of the netminder, then I don't really care who you replace with whom, because it's not going to change the fortunes of the Jets.
I bet you Dubois scores a goal on the power play tomorrow night against the Devils, tips a Josh Morrissey point shot in. It's going to happen. You know that these guys,
your predictions never happen, in fact.
Well, it's not a Ginsburg guarantee. He's just making a prediction.
Well, let me ask you this. Could you foresee a circumstance where the Jets, rather than loading up one of the power play units,
mix it up?
Almost have two, instead of having a 1 and a 2, almost try and go with a 1A, 1B sort of power play setup. Maybe use a guy like Cole Perfetti in a more pronounced situation. Maybe, they take 2 guys off of that first power play unit. And again, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just wondering if instead of going, a minute 40, 20 seconds or a minute 30 seconds, they try and go more of a minute and a minute to give each more power play time. I mean, I don't know that that's the solution from my perspective. I just don't know that they have enough.
Well, Kevin Stenlund is not the solution on second power.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know.
I realize he's a good face-off guy and everything like that. And when Adam Lowry is playing as much as he plays on the penalty kill, but I prefer Lowry on that power play unit. I mean, maybe that's just me. The chat might disagree. You boys might disagree, but no, you're absolutely right. And it goes back to what I said. And it's the Jets coaching staff that has to figure this out. It's not us that has to figure out. We can talk about it all we want. I mean, these guys are paid to figure out the power play, right? There's just way too much skill on this team. Like you mentioned, Drew, Perfetti's on the second power play unit. He's got a great shot. He's got great vision. He can set plays up. Mm-hmm. Maybe Perfetti ends up getting more power play time on that first unit. But it's got to be better. We talked about it over the last month, 25th in the NHL. It's just, to me, it's unacceptable with the amount of forward talent the Jets have.
It certainly is going to be something to pay close attention to when the Jets practice in about 30 or so minutes time. All the latest from the Jets practice. I think they're in, where are they practicing today? New York, New Jersey, one of the two. I'm not
New Jersey.
Okay, wherever they practice today, they're all the latest will be on illegalcurve.com. And we remind you, of course, that the Illegal Curve post-game show coming your way tomorrow night, right around 8:45 p.m. back here on our YouTube channel. Stay with us as we discuss the Jets and the Devils tomorrow night. When we come
live from
back,
Canada Life.
What's that?
Live from Canada Life.
Why live from Canada Life?
Because I'll be at the Moose game.
I don't understand.
Well, I'm saying I'll be doing the post-game show.
There's a Moose game at the same time. Dave's going to do the post-game show after the Moose game from the arena.
The Moose game tomorrow is at 6:00.
Yeah, I thought it was a 2:00 start, but it's a 6:00 start. So.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I knew Monday's game's a 2:00 start. Yeah, I'm going to be there on Monday, but I didn't realize that.
Well, you're going to be there, Drew, because it's superhero day.
Well, I am.
You have to wear your cape.
That's right. I'm dressing up as myself and letting people come gather around and take pictures with me. The children are going to be very, very disappointed, but it's something to look forward to nonetheless. When we come back, our good friend Jeff O'Neill joins us on the program. Stay with us. O-Dog up next. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Bottom of hour number 2, Jeff O'Neill, the O-Dog, going to join us momentarily. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you on this Saturday morning. A bit of a raucous show so far. We always appreciate everyone that's joined us, whether you're just joining us in the chat, whether you're just tuning in. Maybe you don't want to participate in the chat, and frankly, I couldn't blame you at all for that. But if you are, then we always appreciate your contributions to this fine
Just make
program.
Sure you smash that like button, folks. Come on.
Right.
There's a lot of over 300 people in the chat right now, and haven't even had 100 likes. So, let's go, Tatel.
Yeah, you do not want to get Dave M angry at you, then hell hath no fury.
It's a great Seinfeld reference right there, Dave.
Anyways, as I was saying,
hell
hath no fury like a Dave Minuk scorned. The Moose,
or stealing O-Dog's truck from his driveway. I wouldn't want to see him after that either, Drew.
That's true. He just wanted his golf clubs back, though. That's all he wanted back. I saw that he don't steal people's trucks, folks. Do you guys know there was a Stadium Series game today?
Yep, Carolina.
Yeah, I'm glad you knew.
That's near your home state of Kentucky, Drew.
Well, it's really not, but
yeah.
I mean, have you
North
looked at the map
Carolina's pretty close, isn't it?
I mean, it's
everything
in the U.S. is relatively.
The two states touch. They border each other, don't they? Oh,
okay. No. North Carolina does not border Kentucky.
I was never good in geography either.
Clearly, and you're
Hey, you remember what happened last time you made a mistake about Kentucky? You gotta be careful here, bud.
Yes. No, what you could have said is that
Mix in the water, bud.
My wife went to grad school in North Carolina. That's true. And we've spent some time in Raleigh. That would also be factually accurate, but no, Kentucky and North Carolina do not border each other. But it was a good effort. I'll give you a C for the execution.
Relatively close, though.
everything's relatively close. There's an entire
No,
state.
California is not close to North Dakota.
Fine, that would be true. But I mean, when you're in that sort of part of the United States, most states are within, for the 8 hours that we drive to Minneapolis, you can get basically almost anywhere in the eastern seaboard of the United States from Kentucky.
I feel like Laura needs to buy me a map of the U.S.
Well, I'd be concerned if my wife was buying you gifts, I'll be honest. But, somebody needs to buy you a map, or you can look at a globe, or they have the internet now.
The reason why I said Laura has to buy me one is because I can't afford one. That's why I was saying that. But you could buy me one too, or Dave, somebody in the chat.
Now, I'm curious. Did you actually drop an Egg McMuffin on the floor?
No, I did not. I could go for an Egg McMuffin, but no, I did not actually drop an Egg McMuffin on the floor.
Okay, then I have a follow-up question to that. Earlier, you were drinking coffee, and it looked like you were drinking coffee out of like a regular ceramic mug that doesn't look like a travel mug, which leads me to two questions. One, are you just bringing ceramic mugs with you from your house out and about? Or two, is Dave now making you coffee every morning when you come to do the show?
It's a good question. Dave does not make me coffee. Dave, as you know, or maybe you don't know, or the chat probably doesn't know, Dave doesn't drink coffee.
I knew
so
that.
Dave did not make me coffee, but my Contigo mug was lost, or maybe I threw it out because it was too old and stained and it was just not good anymore. So what I did was I brought coffee in a water bottle.
Oh, Jesus.
And then Dave lent me one of his mugs, and then I poured it into the mug. So that's what happened. Is this similar to 7 years ago when I showered with a hose?
And then as he got upset because I don't have a microwave, so he couldn't warm up his coffee. Want to use my toaster oven.
I'm going to say you need a travel mug more than you need a map. That would be my first comment initially. And I love that you brought it in a water bottle, because that water bottle is now ruined. You can't use that water bottle anymore. So it's like when Homer puts the leather patches on his jacket on the Simpsons episode and manages to ruin both jackets at the same time because he actually cut the leather patches out of a leather jacket to do so. So good job on your part there, Ezzy. That was well done, and I know what you're getting for your birthday nonetheless. You want to check in on Jeff if you don't mind, to see if he's up and going to be joining us momentarily?
Yeah, I just sent him a text. I gave him a little bit of a wake-up call this morning, so he should be joining us momentarily, I think.
There he is. From TSN 1050 Overdrive, a good friend of ours, Jeff O'Neill, joins us on the program. Jeff, are you a coffee drinker?
Yeah, I have my first cup at 5 a.m. and probably it continues until about 10 a.m. So 5
a.m. Why are you up so early, my man?
I don't know. It's a cycle though. Up early, by 9 o'clock at night, I'm kaput, done. And I work until 7, so that basically means watching the majority of the first Eastern Conference game. Then it's pretty much game over.
That's it. As long as nothing ever of interest happens in the third period, you're fine, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. A lot of Sports Center highlight catch-ups in the morning.
Jeff, are you currently in a robe?
No, buddy. I'm in a hoodie. Come on, dude.
I couldn't see it. It looks like a little bit of a robe. I wasn't the only one. Drew, Dave, I thought O-Dog might have just come out of the shower or something.
No. Shower happens on Sunday. I give myself a break on Saturday.
Interesting. That's a good policy. For me, it's usually the opposite. Usually it's Sunday is my day off of showering, and I like to keep myself clean for Saturday, but I can appreciate where you're coming from. Jeff, we obviously got to talk about the news of the day from around the NHL and everything else. The Leafs, they make the big splash. Obviously, this is the big splash when it comes to Toronto acquiring Ryan O'Reilly, acquiring Achari. Your thoughts when you saw the trade go down late last night? Did they overpay? Is this what they needed to do? Doesn't matter what the cost is. Damn the Torpedoes this season. You gotta win no matter what.
You know what? I think when you haven't had success and you haven't been able to get out of the first round, if you want to, let's just talk about the addition first. Bringing Ryan O'Reilly into the mix, pretty versatile player. And you look at him having the ability to maybe play left wing with Tavares at times, centering the third line at times, maybe centering the second line at times. It's just when you add another quality piece like that, and Sheldon Keefe has been known as kind of like a guy that tinkers with the lines a bit and tries different combinations. And it's just a nice piece to have when you talk about 4-on-4 play, killing penalties, a different element on the power play if needed. So the price is what it is, man. It's that's the price of playing ball these days as far as acquiring a player like that. You look at in the years past, Ben Sherratt, it's you want to get that guy, it's a first round pick. So it's the price is what it is. And Achari's another valuable guy. I think that, this is a big, I'm not sure what goes on out in Winnipeg, but this is a big analytics community around here. And I'm not sure what they think about Noel Acciari, but an old school person like myself, just a tough right-handed player that plays with grit and understands what it takes to win. And he just brings a little bit of mojo. It's like they played Boston a couple of weeks ago and they were terrible. It didn't have their best stuff. But I think when you bring in a guy like that, the idea of pushing them around, I don't think it happens that much. So it's just both of those guys, they add so much. And as far as the price, guys, that's just what you got to do. And you would have to think, like, there's so many unknowns coming up for the Maple Leafs, like Kyle and his contract. Like, I just love the idea where it hasn't been working in the playoffs. So let's just put the chips all in here. Is there more to come? I'm sure the fans hope so. But let's just see what this does and how this can help the hockey team.
And I agree with you 100%, O-Dog, because, people are saying maybe the Leafs gave up too much, but you got the 2019 Conn Smythe Trophy winner. And Noel Acciari, as you mentioned, he's a guy, I think, you would agree too, that the playoff experience with both the Bruins and the Panthers, right? Like, he brings that sandpaper, but he also brings that playoff experience. And that's what the Leafs need. And I was talking to Drew and Dave about this. Like, to me, like, Kyle Dubas had, you have to beat Tampa Bay in the first round. Like, you're not thinking, necessarily, we're acquiring Ryan O'Reilly to win the Stanley Cup. Obviously, that's the ultimate goal. But as you mentioned, you got to get out of the first round. So I guess the question I was going to ask you is, does that make them now better than Tampa Bay? Or maybe, another way to say it is are they now good enough to beat Tampa Bay in the first round?
Ezzy, I think the only thing you can do is improve your chances. And I try to explain this to some people that the idea is just to get in, because I'm pretty sure teams in the East, the year Tampa Bay was just crushing everyone and they had 100 and something points, thought, oh man, what the hell are we going to do when we play those guys? Guess what? They got swept in the first round by the Columbus Blue Jackets. So stupid things happen in the playoffs. You might get an injury to the key player for the Boston Bruins that might affect their play, even getting through the first round, let alone surviving the second. Like just a key injury to a goaltender or something, like weird things. You can't look at it as, oh my God, how are we going to play these two giants in the Atlantic Division? And how are we ever going to survive it? It's just a defeatist attitude, and you might as well not play competitive pro sports if that's going to be the approach. So I think just aligning yourself and giving yourself the best chance. So even if everybody's healthy, they're looking at you saying, man, that Toronto team up front, that's a pretty good team, and we're going to have a tough time matching up against that. And God forbid if something does happen, like I just mentioned, it just increases your chances even better. But you bring in a guy like Ryan O'Reilly, just an experienced guy. He's just a great add to the mix and really brings a different element.
Jeff O'Neill, the O-Dog from TSN 1050 Overdrive, is our guest Saturday morning. We're on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, where you're watching us live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms, and of course the podcast edition available shortly after the show wraps up.
Well, Jeff, we're a Winnipeg-based show, so we got to ask you about the Winnipeg Jets and what you're seeing from this team from afar. Of course, fans are losing their minds after they went 1 for 7 on the power play, including 3 5-on-3s, which they failed to score on. But what are you seeing from the Jets? And what, in your mind, when you look at the Winnipeg Jets, what is your big need for them in terms of an ad?
I think you look at both positions. Obviously, they are locked in maybe better than any other team as far as their goaltender. And if you can just, like, here with the Raptors, they've been talking about bringing in Pirtle, kind of that rim protector guy. If you can get one more guy back there that can help kind of protect the front of the net for Connor Hellebuck, and if you could just possibly add to, I love their forward group. I've said it, and this is the last year, guys, I am going to say it about the Winnipeg Jets that I still believe, because I've been saying it forever, saying, you know what, this forward group, like, how are you going to contend with these guys? And it seems like they've gotten by all the nonsense from the beginning of the season. There have been some ups and downs lately, but I would rather have a team struggle right now just before kind of the playoffs and then get it together. It's kind of it might not sound good to Winnipeg fans, but this is a good, if you're comfortably in and you're not like really struggling for points, it's not a bad time to struggle because it allows you to get it back on track. And then you could maybe make an acquisition to help that forward group or help the defense. Whatever way, like Chevy, you know, he's been there a long time too. When is his moment going to be let's put the chips all in here, as opposed to, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when is the last massive splash that they've made at the deadline? What has it been?
Yeah,
Kevin Hayes.
Yeah. Or going back to 2018, Paul Stastny, which actually led to success. But yeah, the last big move they would have made was the Kevin. I mean, we're not talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois, Patrick Laine here, but prior to the trade deadline, 2019 with Kevin Hayes.
I mean, even if you asked your fan base, would they say that's like an all-in, chips all-in type of moment? I don't think so. So why not give it a shot? And the way I've described the Winnipeg Jets, like maybe this could be their Washington Capitol type year where people are maybe closing the window on them, and all of a sudden they just say, you know what, we're going to put it together. They have the goaltender to do it. So why not push everything in? Because when guys like Timo Meier and different star players have come up, Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, who knows, I don't hear the Winnipeg Jets name a lot. It's all different teams. Why not throw your name in the hat and just say, we want to be a part of this? Why can't they go out and get a guy like Timo Meier? I think they have the cap space to do it this year. It's just why not? Mm-hmm. Throw your name in the hat and create a buzz there. There's a buzz in Toronto. Create your own buzz in Winnipeg. Jamie McLennan has been talking about them the last couple of weeks, saying they could do something big and make something happen. And if you're a fan of the team, and I'm sure you guys wouldn't mind it either, go ahead and try to make something happen. Even if you don't, at least attempt it, which I'm sure Chevy's doing.
They certainly get tongues of wagging, Jeff. What does it do to a dressing room when you acquire guys like Ryan O'Reilly or Noel Acciari, but you don't subtract anyone from the active room? What obviously it juices the dressing room, but does it provide even extra energy when you don't actually have to lose somebody that you've been fighting with, for this many games so far this year?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Bo Horvat transaction, they're pretty happy that they brought in a good player like that. But it cost who's the young Barzell, his best friend in Beauvillier, going the other way. So he might be a little bit pissy that his best friend's out of the locker room. But when you bring in a key piece, and guys, I was a part of a team. It was so frustrating for a long time in Carolina, where those were the days of watching the Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings and the New York Rangers and whoever else, maybe the St. Louis Blues in the West. They loaded up every year, and we just sat there, and it's like, yeah, we acquired a minor league defenseman from the Philadelphia Flyers, and you actually don't feel like you're a part of the mix. It's just so when you do something like this, it really energizes everybody, and you really feel confident. Like, you just look at your roster and the star players that are around there. You're like, we got as good a chance as anybody. And we talked about the idea in 2023 of just getting in. Like, that's the idea. You get in and all kinds of weird things can happen. We've talked about Gary Bettman's format here, where it's like, after the first round, there's some good teams that are gone. Like, some real quality teams are out of the playoffs. And then everything just shrinks up from there. And then all of a sudden you're looking, there's 8 teams left, and you're like, couple upsets, couple this, couple that. Who knows, man? Anything could happen. You guys look at the West this year. Like, who really scares anybody out there right now?
Nobody. It's wide
open.
open.
The only team I think you could point to is Colorado.
You know what? If Edmonton could get some goaltending, watching what McDavid and Draisaitl did last year, that would scare the hell out of me too. But who knows what's going to happen in net with them? It's wide open out there, man. So if I'm the Jets, I'm looking at that as a situation where we probably have the best goaltender out there, maybe hands down. So let's make a move. I think it would be fantastic.
Sorry, I'm going to skip ahead for a second here, Jeff. And you talked about the West. Calgary. What do you make of Alan Walsh coming out with his comments defending Jonathan Huberdeau and really putting Daryl Sutter and Brad Treliving on blast earlier this week? What do is that a sign that things are just really rotten in that room? What's your perspective when you see an agent coming out and doing that?
Well, first of all, Alan Walsh, it's just, for him, I believe it's a distraction. It's a distraction to take away from the lack of production from one of his clients. And he cares a lot about his clients. There was the episode at the World Juniors where he was like, my guy doesn't have his equipment, Air Canada, figure it out. And everyone was like, how dare you? And he's like, I don't care about those tweets that come my way, because my job, I get paid a lot of money to get that guy's equipment back. And guess what? He got his equipment back. So I don't know. The motivation, I think, is a distraction out in Calgary. But at the end of the day, they got to figure something out there and rather quickly because the team's not playing well. Huberdeau's not playing well. And they got a bunch of offensive guys that aren't contributing like they used to. And obviously with Lindholm playing with Tkachuk and Gaudreau last year, all three of them had 100 points. And I haven't checked Lindholm's stats lately, but I don't think he's exactly on fire. So they need to figure something out. You just look at that lineup. It's like, why isn't Lindholm playing with Huberdeau? And why isn't Kadri in the mix somewhere? They have no offensive flair to them right now. So it's up to everybody involved. And we're talking about a player whose extension kicks in next year at 10.5.
Mm-hmm.
So something better start working because you're pissing away money if you're paying a guy that and he continuously doesn't produce.
Absolutely. And I wanted to go back to the Carolina Hurricanes, who, of course, you played for many years on those great teams with Rod Brind'Amour, Rod Francis, so many other really good players. And I look at the Hurricanes and, these guys will back me up here. Hurricanes, and this wasn't a wild card pick or anything like that. I predicted the Hurricanes would go to the Stanley Cup final, and you look at them 9-1 in their last 10, and everybody's obviously focused on the Bruins with 87 points. They only have, 8 or 9 regulation losses, but there's the Hurricanes only 7 points back. I mean, I think you'd agree. Maybe they lack a superstar, even though Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov are pretty good in my books. But, we talked about the Jets and Timo Meier. Like, is Timo Meier the guy that, I realize the Devils apparently are interested and they have a lot of cap space, but first off, do you think that not enough people are talking about how good the Hurricanes are? And it's maybe because, the Lightning and the Leafs are also in the Eastern Conference with the Bruins. There's lots of good teams there, but do you think that would put them, I guess, over the top? I know it's a cliche, but it just seems to me like they still need one more scorer and then it's going to be over and they're really going to take that next step and win a cup.
Especially with Pacioretty gone for the season, Ezzy. I mean, they got that money. It's like, what are they going to do with that? And I know Rod Brind'Amour. He learned from Peter Laviolette. Peter Laviolette was always up the GM's ass to get more players and get better players in there to help win. And I know Roddy Brind'Amour is like that. You look at their team last year, obviously Freddie Anderson is a major question mark and a major concern for that organization going into the playoffs. Can he be trusted as far as performance and health? It's a major question. But you look what that team has, go all in. Last year they brought in Max Domi, who Max is a good player. I really like Max Domi. But if we're talking about the chips going in for different organizations, you only get so many chances of these windows that you have. And Carolina's been good for 3 or 4 years. They're always hovering around winning the President's Trophy, and then not much goes on in the playoffs. So if Roddy Brind'Amour and those boys down there, they're probably thinking if there's a chance to get a real quality player, all the quality teams are in the same position. And I'm sure the coaches like Roddy Brind'Amour and Lindy Ruff are all saying the same thing to their GM. Go get me that Timo Meier. This guy's 6'4". He scores 30 goals. He's got 30 goals already. He can skate, and he's just a massive asset. And any team would be welcoming that. So go ahead and make it happen. I'm sure but Carolina, I'm glad they went and got Brent Burns because he's that kind of grizzled veteran back there who plays for keeps and he's all business. And if they could add maybe one more, I don't know if Timo Meier's like that, but just kind of add some guys that play for keeps up front to support that Aho and Svechnikov and some of the Teravainen and those young skill players. I think they can make a run. But Freddie Anderson is the key to all in Carolina because we all know what he's done in the playoffs as far as performance in the past. And last year, he pulled the disappearing act. So who the hell knows what's going to go on with that guy come playoff time.
Well, Jeff, yesterday was Friday night. It was a night of Connors, 100-point night for Connor Bedard in the WHL. And, of course, Connor McDavid, 100 points, 101 points in 56 games for the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, is it just – I know I'm just mentioning Bedard just because this kid is just phenomenal what he's doing. But what McDavid's doing, again, it just seems like every single year you're thinking, okay, you kind of know where his ceiling is, especially with him and Draisaitl, and then he just hits another level. That entire Oilers team, talk about offensive depth, they're all getting it done, and that was without Evander Kane. Now he's healthy, and he's playing for them. But what Connor McDavid is doing in Edmonton just seems – I can't believe I'm saying it seems remarkable, given that every year it seems like it's remarkable. But this year, again, he's just doing the remarkable.
Yeah, I don't want to pump my own tires, guys, but I kind of predicted it. I just think at his age, and I said in all the season shows. Like, I think he's a little bit, his ass is chapped a little bit last year. He didn't win the Hart Trophy. And I just think that he wanted to say, I'm ending this discussion about who the best player in the world is, and I'm going to show everybody. And if this guy hits like, he might hit 60 and 140 points or something. And it's just something we haven't seen since the 90s or 80s type of hockey. It's like, we were in the era of 97 points was just like, you're going to win the Art Ross and it's the best we've ever seen. But this he's gone nuts. And I think he turned a corner last year in the playoffs where it was like, I got to start doing more in the playoffs and I can elevate. And I think once he realized that there was a different level, it's just lights out. He's literally unstoppable. You can't keep up, and he's got the moves and he drives to the net. He's an unstoppable player. The way the game is called and the way the refs are and the penalty, you cannot stop that guy right now. You can't slash him. You can't hook him. There's no way to defend against it. And he understands that once he takes off. And the other kid you mentioned, seeing him at the World Juniors, he's outrageous too. I had to stop myself a bunch of times and ask Bob or James or Cheryl, I'm like, am I watching what I think I'm watching here? Like, this guy's way better than everybody else. Like, should I be drooling or should I not be drooling? It's just like good food. Should I be drooling over this or not? And that guy, I just kept saying to myself, that's way better than everybody else. And you get the comments like, oh, the competition, some of these countries aren't that good. I'm like, okay, but nobody else is getting 8 points.
Yeah.
Like, why is it only him? Why is it only him? They're way better than everyone else, and they have a maniacal desire to just be great. And you put the combination together, it's scary stuff.
You know who else was maniacal and to be great? And this is my chance to pump our boy O-Dog's tires. Jeff O'Neill, not only did he score 41 goals for the Hurricanes, but he put up back-to-back 120-point seasons together for the Guelph Storm. So you were pretty good back in the day as well, Jeff.
Buddy, checks in the mail. Checks in the mail.
So let me just piggyback on that a bit, though. You talk about, McDavid in the regular season, stupendous. The league calls the game different in the playoffs. Now, they shouldn't, but they do. How does he... it's ridiculous that he has to change his game to account for playoff officiating, but what does he need to do in order to still be that dominant when he's allowed to be hooked and held and tripped and slashed and all the bullshit that happens come playoff time?
Ooh, I didn't know we could swear on this show.
Oh, yeah,
I'm going to start firing some out.
Go for it.
He proved last year against the LA Kings that he can get it done, and the Calgary Flames. It's like, I'm going to put this on the ice and you just can't stop it. And that's, the Colorado Avalanche, I think, were just too deep and too physical, and they put Makar on him, and it was just maybe too much for even him. But I think he decided last year that I'm going to crank this up, and I'm tired of not having success in the playoffs. It's really weird when you think about it, how much better him and Draisaitl are than most of the league. It's like those guys, when they're on the ice, it's just no contest, and they got to be looking at themselves. And they probably had candid moments. I understand they're pretty good friends or whatever, but they probably had lunch or dinner sometimes saying, how the hell have we not advanced? How have we not gone to a Stanley Cup final? And part of that is the organization, what they put around him. But if they could ever get goaltending, which is a scary idea for them, there's been some times, and I thought Stuart Skinner was going to kind of emerge as like that starter, and he's a bigger guy and he takes up more of the net, but Jack Campbell, as much as I like him come playoff time, he kind of scares the hell out of me a little bit. Like, he really does. Like, I don't know what he's going to bring to the table. If he goes on a heater streak, it's great, but you're just wondering when the bubble's going to burst. So
when that bad goal
McDavid just knows that he can continually get better and bring more to the table, and playoffs is a little tighter. But, man, I'll tell you what, the way the refs are calling games right now, it's just it's a joke, I think. Like, it's not even enjoyable. It's like there's no competition. This is a skills or not a skills competition. It's a special teams competition. All there is power plays and penalty. It's just like, okay, I guess we're gonna watch the power plays of both teams. There's no competitive.
It disrupts the flow, right? Like, and we saw that between the Jets and the Blue Jackets, right? Like, there were 12 combined power plays, and you've seen that, with the Leafs as well.
And
right?
they're the most marginal calls. I mean, that's the problem.
It's just like, come on, guys. When somebody steps on somebody's stick, it's not tripping. Like, That's what we're getting. It's
I don't know if you saw that play.
Somebody falls down.
I don't know if you saw the play with Pierre-Luc Dubois in the neutral zone, Jeff, but it was like literally guys were interlocked like hands and they called him a penalty. And I was like, it was nothing egregious, not worth calling. And then Laine scores on the power play. So, yeah. I mean, it's just, it's one of those.
I'm tired of seeing that. So it almost seems like they're sending a message saying, guys, this year, come playoff time, it's not going to be prison rules out there. So get ready for it. So I hope that doesn't happen because I love the physicality and the competitiveness of playoffs. I hope those don't turn into special teams as well.
O-Dog, trucks come and go. Did you get the clubs back?
No, man. I was hopeful. I saw a tweet from like the big thing in Toronto is I guess your truck gets stolen and they get it to Montreal and it goes on a shipping container. God knows who the hell's who's checking these shipping containers is beyond me. But I saw a tweet, if you lost golf clubs in Napanee, which is like straight east, give us a call. And the guy was like, sorry, man, these are shitty old Callaways. And I'm like, no, man. I had like 2 sets of dialed in tailor-made golf clubs, a nice putter. It's just really sad stuff.
You know what? Look at it's tough. I know what it's like breaking in a new set of clubs, but at the very least, you get to have the fun and the enjoyment of trying to find that sweet spot again. Maybe look at the bright side. That's all.
Oh, dog! If we find the truck here in Manitoba, we'll take care of that guy and we'll make sure you get your clubs back because we're 3 tough Jews right here.
I like to hear it.
Jeff O'Neill from TSN 1050 Overdrive in Toronto, a good friend of ours. Thanks, O-Dog. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Always fun being on. We'll talk soon.
Take care. There he goes. There he goes. What a great way to end this morning's program.
Don't steal someone's truck. Just don't steal someone's truck.
Yeah.
Period. And that's got to be unsettling for Jeff, right? It's got to wake up and your truck is gone in your driveway.
It's unsettling for anybody.
The Manitoba equivalent is having your window smashed.
Well, you just feel violated. I've had my bike stolen or something, and it's not the is it the end of the world? No, but it just you're coming on my property, you're stealing my bike. It makes you feel.
I was waking up to go to the gym, and I all of a sudden I'm like, why do I see like sunlight beaming into my car? And then I realized they had smashed my window.
Your window wasn't there.
That's why, Dave. You have your just to the left.
I know. I was going to say my bike is like 5 feet away from Messi.
Morco here. He's got $1,000 bike that he just keeps in the house.
Well, now that's stolen. Thanks, Ez.
Yeah. No, give out his address and his garage code, Ezzy, and you'll be perfect.
Well, it's not in the garage, Drew. It's in the house.
Well, you'll find a way to get into the house too, is what I was saying there.
Fair point.
Great show this morning. We appreciate both Murat Atesh and Jeff O'Neill for joining us. In case you missed any of it, it'll be available for the immediate replay on YouTube, and of course, the podcast edition will be available for download really shortly thereafter. Big thank you to all the sponsors of the show who make the post.
Put on your antlers. It's time for the Minuk Moose Minute on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
I gotta go.
That's okay. I'm going to do a very quick one, Drew. Drew, as he mute Drew, so he can't speak.
Drew, you're going to the same place that I am after the show. We're both going to Festival.
I'm not going till later, so I'm not going till later. I have somewhere to be. So...
Drew, you can wait a couple minutes.
Hey, Drew. You know what you didn't need to do then? You didn't need to ask Jeff O'Neill that last question. Kind of submarine my question. It was kind of an unnecessary addition. So if you wouldn't have asked that question, I could have gotten my Minuk Moose Minute in because it was a game that needed to be mentioned. I'm sorry, Drew. Sorry for you. Sorry for everybody else. But I think the people in the chat want the Moose. T. Conapoli wants the Moose. Fort Gary Q wants the Moose. C-Mac, I think, wants the Moose. Kenny's water bottle. There we go. He got it. Anyways, the point is the Moose were in action, closing out their 2-game set. The kickoff this 8-game homestand against the Iowa Wild, and the Moose didn't get off to the best start. Penalty trouble, I should say, resulted in the first goal on the first shot for Iowa. They took a 1-0 lead, but then it was all Moose the entire game. They outshot the Iowa Wild. It was like 38-11, and then Leon Gavanke got called for a 4-minute penalty with 4 minutes to go in the game. So the Wild fired off 4 shots on Arvid Holm, but couldn't score to tie it. But the Moose outshot them 11-5, 14-3, and 13-7 in the hockey game. Outshot him, like I said, overall 38-15. First goal scored by Dominic Toninato. Originally thought it was going to be Jeff Malot's goal, but it was tipped by Dominic Toninato, tie the game. And then early in the third period, I think just 6 seconds in, Jansen Harkins, his 12th goal of the season, which would prove to be the game winner. The Moose improved to 16-3-2. They've now won 4 straight, 5 points in 5 of their last 5 games. They're 4-0-1-0, and they're rolling up that Central Division, chasing Milwaukee and Texas. And now their next set is against Grand Rapids. They'll play a back-to-back. They're off today. They're playing a back-to-back tomorrow and Monday, which is crazy. They're playing 6 o'clock on Sunday. Then they play 2 o'clock on Monday. So not a lot of time between games, but hey, should be a lot of fun. Louis Riel Day on Monday is going to be, I think, close to 7,000 people in attendance, including Drew and his crew. So should be a good one. I'll be there, of course. And the Moose are rolling. Sorry, Drew. And we don't know, just to quickly, some people ask me, I don't know why Simon Lundmark didn't play in the game. I forgot to ask after the game why he was out. And also Alex Limoges, the leading scorer, he left the game after the first period. So we'll have to find out. They didn't have Nolan Baumgartner, who we spoke to, didn't have an update. And so we'll see if that impacts them on Sunday. And of course, Captain Jimmy Olney, who played his first game of the season in Toronto, he didn't play either of these 2 games. He was on the ice for morning skate the other day. So I'm assuming they're just going to work him back in slowly.
There you go. There's the Minuk Moose Minute.
And then, sorry, quickly, the Ice kicked off 10 games on the road. Yesterday, I believe they were in Moose Jaw, where they won 7-1.
There you go. The Ice
and tonight they're in Regina against Connor Bedard.
Yeah, they keep winning on the ice. Off the ice is certainly a different story altogether, but we'll let our buddy Mike Sawatsky and Paul Friesen keep track of that story as well. Quality Minuk Moose Minute, quality show on this Saturday morning. We thank everyone for joining us. We thank our sponsors, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, Grid Park, and The Keg. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. We're back tomorrow night right around 8:45 p.m. for the post-game show.
See you at Festival, Drew. Spency might be there as well.
There you go. It's going to be a party. We'll be at Festival later this afternoon.
Beaver Tails for all.
There you go. Fun. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. For Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mandel. This has been the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow @Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, illegalcurve.com.